So much has changed in the world of pregnancy nutrition since I was pregnant over 20 years ago. From the best pregnancy diet to understanding the connection between infant mortality, health, and adult disease, there's so much to know and a lot at stake. I've invited registered dietitian Liz Ward on the show to share her experience and expertise in this area. So in this episode, we'll cover health before pregnancy and why it's important, food cravings during pregnancy, how to avoid getting too hungry, nutrients that help to ensure a successful pregnancy, prenatal supplements, and how food insecure expectant moms can get more help. If you're a devoted listener or a first-timer, you are listening to The Nourished Child, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of raising healthy ones inside and out. This is episode number 120, and I'm your host, Jill Castle, a pediatric dietitian, author, and creator of The Nourished Child, a website for parent nutrition education. So let's get on with it, shall we?
Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Okay, folks, in the latest child nutrition news, this has been a new addition to the podcast that I've actually really enjoyed bringing to you. So I kind of cull the latest news and research in child nutrition or just different areas that I might be experiencing with you via a guest or for myself with you. But anyways, feeding food insecure kids in the school environment still is top of the list in the news arena, from legislation to improving access and ensuring ongoing access to how schools across the nation can step up to make sure that all kids are fed. That's really been what has been in the news. An article out of NPR, and I'll include the link to that article in the show notes. Louis Garda, the president of the Food Research and Action Center, which is also referred to as FRAC, he says, COVID has just wreaked havoc on so many things, on public health, on economic stability, and obviously on food insecurity. In non-pandemic times, this is interesting, I was interested and I'm quoting this article, households with children were nearly 1.5 times more likely to experience food insecurity than households without children, according to the USDA, which reported that 13.5% of households with children experienced food insecurity last year. That affects more than 5 million children. But then came the coronavirus, and the Brookings Institution did an analysis earlier this summer and found that in late June, 27.5% of households with children were food insecure. That means that some 13.9 million children are living currently in a household characterized by food insecurity. So a separate analysis was done by researchers at Northwestern, and they found that insecurity has more than tripled among households with children, up to 29.5%. So that's just to give you some insight on how coronavirus has affected families with food insecurity. And I actually have an upcoming interview with Clancy Harrison, who is the director of a food bank in Pennsylvania and an advocate for hunger relief, food insecurity relief. And I think you'll enjoy that conversation I have with her. That'll be releasing in a couple of weeks. But food insecurity has exploded since coronavirus has hit. In other news, this is some research around maternal malnutrition, and it relates to the conversation I'm having today with my guest, Liz Ward. But the researchers from the Milken Institute School of Public Health, which is housed at George Washington University, just recently received about a $2 million grant to investigate ways to decrease malnutrition in pregnant women. This grant was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But Emily Smith, who happens to be an assistant professor of global health and exercise and nutrition sciences, she is the lead researcher for this study. She says that maternal nutrition research lacks modern methods to study the role of micronutrients in pregnant women. She says 75 to 80% of women take prenatal vitamins during pregnancy, which is a recommendation from the USDA, but she says that the USDA's guidelines are based on minimal and dated research on pregnant women. So I thought that was really interesting. She's quoted as saying, they do that because as we understand from the USDA dietary reference intake guidelines, they say that pregnant women should have more micronutrients. That's why you take a prenatal vitamin. But those numbers about why you should take that much iron, that much folic acid, for example, or that much calcium, she says those numbers actually are not based in very much research of pregnant women. So I'll be interested to see the results of her research, and it'll be interesting to see if those numbers, those recommendations for different micronutrients change as a result of that. Now, you can get these article or the link to this article, the study, as well as the NPR article in the show notes. Go to jillcastle.com/120. That's 120 for episode number 120. Now, for a personal update, just to keep you in the loop of what's going on in my life, I just finished updating and publishing the Smart Mom's Guide to Starting Solids. I actually wrote that book back in 2017, released it as an ebook, then a year later decided that I should convert it into a print book, which I did. But now since the 2020 dietary guidelines for Americans have come out, I went back in and updated minor updates to reflect those guidelines. But I have to tell you, I've been operating from the science from a long time, and these guidelines just reflect the latest in the science, basically. There's nothing really new. I also gave the book a big facelift, so I got a brand new book cover, which I'm excited about. And I decided to take the book to a wider market. So originally it was on Amazon only. You could not get that book in bookstores or libraries. I'm changing that. So we're going wider, and you now can get that ebook, The Smart Mom's Guide to Starting Solids, on any device. And the print book is available for all bookstores, libraries, book fairs, and more. You can order bulk quantities of the book. So it's just making it a lot easier. I love Amazon, but Amazon isn't the entire market out there, and I wanted to make sure my books were available to a broader market. So for me, it's a big accomplishment because I had to learn how to self-publish, number one, but number two, I had to learn how to go wide. And that took me some time over the summer. I spent a lot of time learning how to do this past summer. And then by the time you hear this episode, the first draft of the Smart Mom's Guide to Healthy Snacking will be finished. The first draft is always the brain dump research phase. Next, I'll be editing and asking for some reviewers of the book. I wrote the book to help moms and parents learn a strategy for providing snacks, as well as spark some fun, creative ideas for healthy snacks. I use an acronym in the book called Snack Smart to guide parents through this process. If you're interested in reviewing the book for me, helping me track any typos, correct any mistakes, because believe me, I make mistakes, I would appreciate it. It's always great to have another set of eyes on the book. If you want to do that, you'll be part of Team Smart Mom. You'll get a free copy of the book. And if you do want to help me out with that, please email me at jill@jillcastle.com. And then last, the ADHD Diet for Kids, my online class for parents, is launching October 14th and 15th with a free training. I will include the link in the show notes for that. You can register. You just enter your email address and you then get access to the free training, which will be live on the 14th and the 15th of October. And then if you do register and you can't make it, you will get a replay of the free training. So I encourage you to sign up for that if you can. Okay, enough about me. Let's get on with the show. First, let me tell you a bit about my guest, Liz Ward. She is a registered dietitian, writer, nutrition consultant and mother of 3 living in the Boston area. She's written several books. She's the author of Expect the Best, Your Guide to Healthy Eating Before, During, and After Pregnancy. And she just released a recent book co-written with her friend and fellow dietitian, Hillary Wright, called The Menopause Diet Plan, a natural guide to managing hormones, health, and happiness. You can read more about these books in the show notes. I will include links where you can grab a copy of them if you'd like. And just a little bit more about Liz. She's been a spokesperson for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics for 9 years and a media personality for several outlets. She recently participated in an infant nutrition conference with me. We were both acting as moderators, and as someone who has a deep knowledge in pregnancy nutrition, I'm excited to have her here to chat about it. So let's meet Liz. Hey, Liz, welcome to the Nourished Child podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you on the show. I love your book, Expect the Best. And aside from the fact that it's an amazing title, it is a great resource for people like myself, dietitians, but for moms as well. And I'm super excited to have you on the show to just kind of talk about pregnancy nutrition, because I have not had any guests on the show to talk about this topic. And when I did a quick in the news Google of pregnancy diet, it's just, there's so much coming out now in terms of the correlation between what you eat during pregnancy and your baby's brain health, the mortality rates of birth, delivery, health of the child, future adult health, obesity. I mean, there's just like so much in the news. So I thought it would be fun and very interesting for my audience to hear your perspective on this topic. But before we get started, what have you been up to? We're recording in August, so a lot of us have been like laying low over the summer during this pandemic phase. So what have you been up to?
Right. We're recording in August of 2020, and that pretty much sums it all up, right?
Exactly.
I have been, just working steadily, but trying to have as much fun as possible in a socially distanced way.
Have you had your family with you this whole time? Like, I have had all 4 of my kids home since March.
Well, one of them is a nurse and she doesn't live with us, and she lives in DC, but the other 2 have been home with us since March. So the 4 of us have been together.
Mm-hmm. And that has its own set of rewards and challenges.
Oh, yes, it does. I've forgotten what it's like to do laundry every day, run the dishwasher every day. But you know what? We are fortunate. We have a nice house where we can all spread out and do our work. So I'm not complaining, even though it sounds like I am.
No, you're not. And I'm not either. There have been some just really wonderful moments. And my husband and I keep saying, what an opportunity to have our adult children back in the home when we would not have that at all at this point. If they were out doing their thing, we might see them a couple of weekends over the summer. We've had a great time together.
Right. And I think when all this is over, we'll look back on it and say, gee, I wish they all lived at home again.
I know. Although I have to say, the burnout on making dinners every night and shopping.
Oh, no, don't even get me started on that one. I thought I was a little bit over that, and turns out I'm not.
Yeah, I know. I have a renewed heart for all of those moms and dads out there that are trying to, feed their families healthfully. It's a lot of work. And when you get away from it, when you have adult children, you forget. It's easy to forget. It's like having a baby and how painful it is and how immediately you forget.
Well, I always say that you have to forget in order for the species to go on, the human species, because if you didn't forget, you may not want to do it again. But
exactly.
You and I have done it a total of 7 times. So here we are.
Here we are. Okay, so let's talk about, just give us an overarching view of the top nutrition concerns that moms should be, thinking about during their pregnancy.
I like to say that the top concern of mine is really your health before pregnancy. That's one of my top concerns. So it's kind of, if you can now important to get your house in order, so to speak, so that you do well as a mom during pregnancy and also provide the most optimum environment for your child. But over 50% of the pregnancies in the United States are not planned. That doesn't mean they're not wanted. It means, oops, I didn't think I was going to get pregnant this month, or I thought it was going to be 6 months from now, kind of a thing. So I think that, if you're planning to get pregnant, you should act like you're pregnant in a lot of ways. So, really eat a balanced diet and enjoyable diet and have a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hard though for young adults, for example,
Mm-hmm.
who may not be living that lifestyle.
Well, I think it's a lifestyle that, we're promoting for everybody for good health. So, a diet that has a lot of plant foods in it, lots of fiber, low in alcohol, especially if you're trying to get pregnant. That really is not something that you should be, consuming, because a lot of times you get pregnant, you don't realize that you're pregnant. So, just a really healthy lifestyle so that you enter pregnancy, at a healthy weight, which, as you were alluding to before, there's a lot of research coming out about, mom's health and what goes on during pregnancy and chronic disease in the child, down the road. So we want moms to, go into pregnancy if they can at a healthy weight, eating a healthy diet. But as you said, that's not always the case. But that doesn't mean that, you're not going to have a healthy child.
Right. And, I have to admit, and for the listeners out there, it's, my first pregnancy was almost 24 years ago. And there were weight guidelines in terms of what constituted a healthy weight gain. Have those changed at all? Or are we talking about, I remember it was like 30 to 35 pounds max. If you were carrying extra weight, if you were overweight, it was around 15 or 20 pounds. Have those parameters changed at all? Or are we still talking about the same numbers? Or
Well, in 2009, new guidelines came out, but it had been 20 years between those guidelines. So, if you were underweight, you should gain a little bit more if you're having just one baby. If you are in what we call a healthy weight range, it's basically 25 to 35 pounds for one baby. If you are in the overweight range, perhaps 15 to 25 pounds. However, I know weight gain is a huge concern for women, and it's one of the things that they may think about almost immediately, after the joy of, the positive pregnancy test, passes, like, well, how much weight am I going to gain? I've worked so hard, to maintain my weight, or I'm worried about my weight. These are just guidelines. Okay. These are suggestions. They are not hard and fast rules. They're based on research that say, if you gain within this range, you have a better chance of doing well yourself as a mom during the pregnancy and having a healthy baby that doesn't have health problems at birth and perhaps decades down the road. So the other issue is, so it's like gaining too much, not gaining enough. And I think that women who have struggled with dieting and body image in the past may struggle with their weight during pregnancy. And it's really important for them to work with their providers, with their registered dietitian who has experience in this area, because it's important to gain enough weight too.
Right. Because what is happening during pregnancy? Why is weight gain so important to a healthy outcome in the baby? And then, obviously what you're eating sort of siphons down to the foods that you're eating and the nutrients, which I'd like to get into too, but sort of help the listener understand, the importance of weight gain. Why is it so important that women gain a certain amount of weight?
So the baby weighs on average, let's say 7.5 to 8.5 pounds. So there's the weight of the baby right there. But your blood volume increases, which is worth a couple of pounds right there. When you don't realize it, your uterus gets bigger. There's a couple of pounds right there. You do put on fat because you're supposed to be protecting the baby. So it's putting on fat so that when you breastfeed later, this is from an evolutionary standpoint now. It's not from this, you should do this, you shouldn't do this kind of a thing. But the idea is that the fat is there for an energy reserve should there be no food coming in. Okay, so this is our DNA. This is our bodies telling us what to do. Your breasts get bigger with fluid. So there's a lot of different ways that reasons that you're gaining weight, and it's not all fat. And the thing that I get really upset about is these celebrities, these trainers that I see on the internet who are talking about having a bump only pregnancy. It's just the baby bump, which I think encourages maybe restriction in terms of calories. And it encourages, a lot of anxiety in women. And I don't think it's the right way to go.
I agree. And I think it also is trickling down to young adults. I mean, I've overheard conversations of my own children's friends and just young adults in general about, weight gain being the biggest concern they have about getting pregnant, like never, ever getting their body back. And I remember having that concern too. And I remember getting the advice, make sure between babies, you lose that baby weight, like really make sure you take that baby weight off before you get pregnant again. I think I just accepted the fact that, this is just the way the natural progression is. You are going to put weight on. And I never really thought, and probably maybe because I'm a dietitian too, that I never ever considered restricting, my energy intake in order to control my body weight or control the size of the baby. It's so interesting. I think just societally, attitudes have really sort of transformed over the decades too.
They have, and weight gain recommendations from doctors, back when my mother was having kids, were just all over the map. And they were really different. In fact, I think my aunt was told to gain no more than 15 pounds, and she wasn't overweight to begin with. So there was just a lot of not unified information coming from practitioners. And the recommendations that we have now are based on science. And, that's, of course, where you and I come down on all the time. We rely on science. And I think it's very important to note that when you don't gain enough weight, the risk for preterm birth and an undersized baby, which is below 5.5 pounds, increases. And the problem with that is underweight and preterm babies often require specialized medical care. You have one chance to do this right. I don't mean to put a lot of pressure on people, but, you need to gain the right amount of weight for you, which you can talk about, with your practitioner, with your dietitian, and, using healthy foods to get there.
Let's talk just quickly about the flip side. What happens, what is potentially the complications of that pregnant mom who's like, yay, I get to eat whatever I want and put on as much weight as I want. I know there are women out there who are doubling down on the recommended weight gain, not necessarily intentionally, but with an attitude of, hey, this is my opportunity, which I can totally appreciate, opportunity to eat whatever I want. Are there concerns regarding, obviously for them, their own health, and it'll be harder to take that weight off, but are there concerns for the baby?
Yes.
With excessive weight gain?
Yes, there are concerns. And so there's two details that we need to talk about here. One is a woman's starting weight, her pre-pregnancy weight. That determines how much weight she should gain, potentially to optimize her health and the baby's health. So you talked about somebody gaining 70 pounds. I know women that have gained 70 pounds, but they started out underweight. So their body was saying, feed me. And they, did fine. They had a great pregnancy. It's important to note that there's no single weight that's best. And we talked about, a range of weights, but pregnancy is not a license to overeat and to say, well, hot fudge sundae every night and I can eat this bag of chips because I'm pregnant. It's amazing how few calories you actually need, in order to grow this baby.
Right.
It's 0 in the first trimester. I mean, if you feel like eating, great, go ahead. If you're hungry, you should eat. Second, third trimester, you should expect to gain weight, during those trimesters. You really won't gain anything significant during the first trimester. But back to your original question, which is really gaining within the recommendations. If you stay within the recommendations, it decreases your risk for, a lot of pregnancy-related issues, including preeclampsia, which is really a blood pressure issue. Women who are overweight at conception and gain more than the suggested amounts increase the likelihood also of gestational diabetes. And the other thing is that, having a larger baby, which you may have with excess weight gain, because there's just more energy around, make a bigger baby, often requires or could require a cesarean delivery, which is surgery, for mom. And it also makes it harder to return to a healthy weight after the baby is born. So the other issue is that bigger babies that are kind of overfed, if you will, in the womb may be bigger children, and when I say bigger, I mean more fat cells, and they could also be at risk for being overweight as children and, of course, later in life, which, has a lot of other trickle-down effects.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of things to think about. I did giggle a little bit there because I think I used to live in the Boston area, and when I was pregnant with my second child, we lived literally a block and a half from a Dairy Queen.
Oh, no.
I used to go get my chocolate Oreo blizzards at least twice a week. I justified it by walking there and walking back, but I definitely had my food cravings, and I definitely had that mindset of, well, I am pregnant and, I've licensed to eat, this a little bit more than normal. So I took advantage of it. What do we know about food cravings in pregnancy? Do we know anything at all?
What we know is we have them.
Yes.
And I certainly have them. I was chuckling when you were talking about Dairy Queen, because with each pregnancy, I had different cravings. So with my last child, I couldn't get enough fruit. I wanted, really fruity things. With the other two, it seemed to be meat and French fries. I could barely drive past a fast food place without pulling in and getting a small fries. So that was pretty nasty, but you get through it and you have to go with it. So what do we know? Well, I always blame the craving on the hormones. I blame most things on hormones when it comes to pregnancy. But, there's no reason not to indulge your cravings. And as I say in the book, I offer a lot of advice about cravings. You just don't want it to get out of control. I mean, you had a blizzard, whatever you had, one of those yummy things twice a week. Well, if you were doing that 7 days a week, you might want to think about, well, this is maybe a little bit too much, or maybe you could go for a smaller size. So just satisfy the cravings, in a small way. But I also find not letting yourself get too hungry is really important too, to kind of not limit the cravings, but maybe limit, the amount of food that you eat to satisfy the craving.
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you avoid getting too hungry?
Well, you eat balanced meals, of course. And, that's a nice mix of carbohydrates, fiber, fat, and protein. And I think that women have traditionally skimped on protein in their meals, and protein helps you to stay fuller for longer. And of course, the fiber is going to help you stay full, but it's also going to help prevent, constipation, which is one of the problems that a lot of pregnant women experience as they go through their pregnancy. So eating, at least 3 meals a day and then a healthy, balanced snack if you want it, I think that will help to keep the cravings not at bay, but it may turn down the volume a little bit.
Kids change a lot. Their nutrition needs, eating habits, and food preferences do too. So much so, it can be hard to keep up. The Nourished Child, a website designed for parents who want more nutrition education, helps parents like you get crystal clear on raising good eaters. We've cracked the code on nourishing the whole child, whether you're raising a baby, a teen, or a child with health concerns. Our nutrition school and parent education programs help you get the inside scoop on food and nutrients, positive food parenting, and building self-motivated, autonomous kids who are good eaters. Visit thenourishedchild.com today. So let's move into just talking about nutrients for a bit, because obviously every nutrient is important, right? But can you highlight a few that perhaps pregnant moms might not be thinking about or paying attention to, and tie those into, the health and development of the baby?
Sure. So, as you said, they're all important. We could be here all day long talking about each one. The one that I really want to highlight for women in their childbearing years who will be able to get pregnant is folic acid. So a woman that, is in her of childbearing age should be getting 400 micrograms of folic acid every single day. And the reason for that is because adequate folic acid is needed during the first 30 days of pregnancy to prevent certain structural birth defects. And that's often the time when a woman doesn't know she's pregnant. And you're talking to a woman that did not know she was pregnant, I think 2 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I was one of those women too.
Okay. So here we are. We're health professionals, right? We know about pregnancy and child development, and we're like, huh? So, it happens to people. And as long as you're taking that folic acid, you are helping to prevent birth defects. Iron is another biggie. Many women start pregnancy slightly anemic, and pregnancy is a real drag on your iron stores. And the reason for that is because you're making lots of new red blood cells, and iron is associated with the red blood cell. That's where it's found. So if you don't get enough iron, you may feel anemic and tired and fatigued and struggling through your pregnancy, but it also may increase the risk for preterm birth as well. So you want to make sure that you're getting enough iron. There's 2 other ones I want to highlight in particular. One is omega-3 fats. You may hear them called DHA or EPA. They're found in seafood. They're also found in dietary supplements, and they're critical for baby's eye and brain development. And then the other one that I think flies right under the radar is choline. And most women listening to this might say, what? I've never heard of that. Well, it's an essential nutrient. It's a B-like vitamin. It's not really a vitamin per se, but who cares about its classification? It's needed for the functioning of all cells, especially in the brain, and particularly in the hippocampus, which is the brain's so-called memory center. And the hippocampus is one of the only areas in the brain that continues to produce nerve cells throughout life. So it's very, very important that women get enough. You can make small amounts, but studies show that women are low in choline even before they conceive.
So it seems like, I totally love that you highlighted all of these, because as I think about them, they're really brain, CNS, central nervous system, focused nutrients. And I remember, I forget what the name of the show was, but didn't like Nature or one of the Discovery channels do a show on how a baby, actually from conception to birth sort of tracked the development and what the baby looked like. And that brain is the first thing. And then the spinal cord, it's really one of those main developmental things that is happening with the growth of the baby. And the brain, the other thing that strikes me too is iron. I was terribly iron deficient with my first one. I was on iron supplementation the entire pregnancy. There are studies in infants that show that there's an endowment that babies are born with, an iron endowment, meaning that they have an iron status that they are born with, and it's directly related to the diet of the pregnant mom. And when babies are born with a low endowment, they are more likely to be iron deficient around the age of 6 months. And of course, we never test infants for their iron status really before like a year. And so it's one of those nutrients that I'm always sensitive to, because we could be having, infants up to age 12 months who are, iron deficient, and we really don't know. And especially if you're nursing after delivery and not supplementing or not getting adequate iron in the diet, babies can be at real risk.
So the other thing about iron is that it's involved in the myelination of nerve cells. So, we want to establish this. Myelin is like insulation, right? So we want to establish this good insulation of nerve cells so that they are communicating with each other properly. And that really has to do, as you're saying, with brain development and learning. There's so much riding on that first year. And there's a lot riding on pregnancy. And if now if we're working backwards even further, there's plenty riding on mom's health prior to pregnancy. And that's something that I think gets lost in the wash here, because if a mom is listening to this, she already has maybe 1 or 2 or 3 children. That's very different than when she went to have her first baby, in the sense that if those nutrients weren't repleted, weren't, given back to her, or she took them back in through food or supplements, she's starting off the 4th pregnancy, or the 3rd pregnancy or the 2nd pregnancy a little bit behind the 8 ball. So it's really important that, we get so busy and we're busy with the other kids that we're not thinking about our own diet. And so to me, until you're done having children, you're always in that preconception phase. And I think the preconception phase, we only think of it as getting prepared for the first pregnancy. No, we have to stay prepared for the subsequent pregnancies. And again, that is no easy task when you're, crazy busy and maybe running after a toddler and not thinking about yourself.
Yeah. So you're really talking about the sort of the exponential accumulation of deficiency over time.
I know women have 6, 8, 10 children and they're all fine. I mean, I know that, but I wonder about how mom is, because the baby will take from you. They will take from you. They're supposed to. So you need to replenish yourself as much as possible. And, I had 2 kids 13 months apart. So I know that that's not easy. And then I had one, 2 years later. So it's, and I know running around, trying to deal with 2 toddlers and being pregnant is not easy, but it's something that you must think about, in order to give yourself the best chance during your pregnancy and also your baby.
Yeah. And I was in the same boat as you for many of those years. And I oftentimes look back at my own pregnancies and I think, I didn't give my baby vitamin D and I didn't take vitamin D. It was kind of a new thing 24 years ago. And I definitely didn't take omega-3 fatty acids. And so I want to sort of touch on this idea of, you mentioned, I didn't do any of that and my babies are fine, but also sort of counteract that with the notion of we do know so much more now. We have so much more evidence around what is critical and what is optimal for both mom and baby. How do you sort of talk a parent through that who might be on the fence of, well, I was fine and I didn't get any of that too? Well, now we have all this information and evidence. And how do you sort of marry those two ideas and bridge somebody to a better path?
Well, I'm chuckling because I'm thinking about a conversation I had with my mother. She said to me, well, we drank and we smoked during our pregnancies and you were fine. I said, well, maybe I could have been a brain surgeon, if you didn't.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So I like what you're saying. You have to go with what the science says now and not worry about what you did before, because that's water under the bridge and there's no use in worrying about it. And what we know now is so exciting. And you alluded to it at the beginning of the show, where you said that, it's just fascinating how much research we're coming across that says that, we can do a great job with our own bodies and with, our babies and kind of get in on the ground floor even sooner than we thought. before, So I think that women should embrace what we know. And again, not worry about what they didn't do.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's great advice. So, all right. If there's a mom out there who is pregnant right now, what would your advice be to her in terms of, the actual foods that she should be eating? And just to piggyback on that, if she doesn't like some of those foods or doesn't eat some of those foods, how can she rectify that?
Sure. So there's plenty of ways, thousands of different ways you can eat to have a healthy baby. It's basically a balanced diet that includes plenty of fiber-rich plant foods and also protein-packed choices such as, there's a wide range of choices there: seafood, lean meat, eggs, tofu, beans. So it doesn't matter, what your eating style is. You can still include everything, not include everything, but, think about everything I just said within the context of the way you like to eat. Like you said, maybe you're vegetarian, so you don't eat seafood or meat, but you eat eggs and tofu and beans. It's all fine. As long as it's balanced and you're getting enough protein and you're making up for what you're not getting through supplements. For example, if you're a vegan, you definitely need supplements when you're not pregnant, but when you're pregnant, even more so. And of course, little treats here and there as well. I mean, that's the way I would advise anybody to eat, but you are just going to increase your calories starting in the second trimester.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you mention supplements, what are the going recommendations today for pregnant women in supplementation? And then, what do you think is really critical in your opinion?
So you may be surprised by this, or your listeners may be surprised by this, but there's no recommendation from any expert, organization about taking a prenatal supplement. It's just something that women do. So as soon as, you call your OB and you say, I'm pregnant, I took a home pregnancy test, they write you a prescription for, this huge prenatal pill, and you go to the pharmacy and you get it, right? And you're like, okay, I'm all set. But, you may not need to do that. If you're eating really well and you were eating well before pregnancy and you have no issue with iron or folic acid or anything, you could probably continue with a regular multivitamin that has 100% of the daily value for iron and for folic acid. Now, if you want to play it safe, you can get that prescription prenatal. That's perfectly fine. Or you could get a prenatal that's sold over the counter. But again, you want to make sure that it has 100% or even more for iron and folic acid. The problem with taking a supplement sometimes is that it's like got a health halo, and it's important to note that no single supplement or combination of supplements can duplicate, the mix of nutrients and other substances in food that work together, to offer you health benefits. I think of multivitamins as a low risk, relatively low cost approach, to filling in nutrient gaps that would affect your health and your child. So as I mentioned before, a vegan, they don't get enough vitamin B12, which is critical for the central nervous system development. They need to take that in supplemental form or through fortified foods, let's say. I'm very big on a multivitamin. A lot of women are bothered by multivitamins, which is why I mentioned that you can have a perfectly healthy pregnancy without taking, one of those big, huge prescription pills if you cannot tolerate them. Even my OB, when she was pregnant, she said, I just can't stomach this. And she took Flintstone's chewable. You have to do what you can do. And I'm not saying you shouldn't discuss this with your provider, but it's important to know that, you don't necessarily have to do what everybody else is doing.
Right. That's good advice.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between a standard multivitamin and a prenatal multivitamin?
Yes. I mean, there are much bigger doses of folic acid
Mm-hmm.
in a prescription prenatal supplement, even over the counter. I don't think they can have more than 1,000 micrograms without being prescription. But some of them get right up there, 800, 900. And, there's no evidence you need that because you're still eating. You're still eating and you're getting nutrients from food.
Right.
What we're doing with the supplement is what the name implies. We're supplementing a healthy diet. Now, if you haven't had a healthy diet up until pregnancy, I would, say you should go with the prescription multivitamin. But a lot of nutrients in the prescription and even some of the over-the-counter ones.
Mm-hmm. And what about choline? I think I remember reading somewhere that choline is not in a prenatal.
Well, the problem with choline is you can't, and it's the same thing with calcium, you cannot put it all in one pill. The pill would probably be 3 inches long. You wouldn't be able to swallow it. It's a very bulky nutrient. You probably should be taking a choline supplement of 500 milligrams a day. I think I mentioned before that there's evidence that a lot of women are not consuming enough choline. So yeah, you can get that separately. You would probably also need, if you're not eating seafood, at least twice a week, omega-3, 200 milligrams of DHA every day. And if you avoid dairy products, you probably need calcium and vitamin D. It gets very specific.
Like a cocktail.
Yeah.
your pregnancy cocktail.
I know. But it all depends on the person. And I think that, I'm speaking very generally, and it would, it would matter.
Exactly. Which is a hat tip to those of you out there listening. If you don't have a dietitian that you can tap into for this more personalized look at your diet and assessment of what your needs are, that could be something that can give you a lot of peace of mind in terms of helping you sort of construct the perfect cocktail of supplements if you need them, or giving you that advice on modifying your diet if you need to do that as well.
Right. And I do talk about it in detail in the book as well. Like if this is you, then you probably need this. If this is you, then you probably need that. But I do recommend that you see a dietitian at least once to get you going on your diet. And, we talked about women having more than one child. And I know that after you have one or two, you may think that you're up on all of the research, and, things do change, like with choline. I mean, that's pretty new to the scene. You and I probably weren't thinking about that when we were having kids. And I think that it pays to keep up, with what's out there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. I want to touch on one last topic before we sort of wrap this up. And that is, what we're doing right now with COVID and this pandemic and food insecurity, which has been so magnified by this epidemic that we're dealing with. What advice or what things can we do for that pregnant mom who is food insecure?
Food insecurity is a problem. It's even worse now, as you mentioned. And, I know there have been a few programs around here in the Boston area where pregnant women would check with their healthcare providers who were able to link them up to programs such as SNAP or WIC, and also food pantries. And I think that you really need to tell your healthcare provider, I'm having a problem here, and, see what they can do, because a lot of these community health centers are hooked in with these programs, and they will make it easier for you to get food, on a regular basis, rather than you trying to piece it all together yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. And there is no shame in asking for help. We are in unprecedented times. And if anything has, pulled back the curtain on food insecurity, COVID is. And I'm thankful for that, because I think that a lot of challenges in not only nourishing yourself, but nourishing your children when you don't have the resources to be able to access the food that you need. SNAP, I'm glad you mentioned SNAP, food banks, WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, which are all government subsidized programs. But WIC, particularly for pregnant moms and children under the age of 5, is a great resource. All right. Well, Liz, tell me, how can people find you? How can they get your book, Expect the Best? And then also tell us, I know you have another book that came out, which I want to segue and have you back on the show to talk about this topic as well. But tell us all about that.
So my new book is on the other end of the spectrum of what we're talking about right now. It's called The Menopause Diet Plan, A Natural Guide to Managing Hormones, Health, and Happiness, which I wrote with my dear friend and dietitian colleague, Hillary Wright. And that comes out in September of 2020. And yeah, it would be great to come back and talk about that 10-year period before your periods end called perimenopause.
Yes.
So, it seems like it's always something with us women, right?
I know. Well, I really appreciate the greater understanding of hormones. I've always been very sort of aware of my body. And I mean, even my golf game changes when the hormones fluctuate. My sports performance changes. I mean, I think so many things change. My balance changes in yoga when, and people look at me like I'm crazy. Like, I'm like, nope, I know this is where I am in the month. And I know I'm going to be a total klutz. So yeah, it would be fun to have you both back on, or just you back on. That would be
great to have us both, because we're pretty funny together.
I bet you are. And how can people find Expect the Best?
Well, Expect the Best, of course, is on Amazon, like every other book in the universe. But people can also go to my website, betteristhenewperfect.com. All my books are explained on that website as well.
Wonderful. So, Liz, it was so great to have you on the show. Oh, I'm so glad you were able to take a day out of your lovely summer to be with me.
Thank you for having me. It was a joy.
Okay there, folks. Well, there you have it. Liz, as you probably know, if you're a follower of the show, she is my first guest to come on and talk about pregnancy. And she did cover a lot here. I think she did a great job of bringing the science to the conversation, but also the flexibility that so many parents, expectant mothers, need to hear. It's an important stage for all children and for all mothers. Liz dives more into her book, Expect the Best. Also, go and check out her brand new book called The Menopause Diet Plan. I know they're both ends of the spectrum, but they really do center around hormones during pregnancy and hormones during menopause. And those hormones, boy, they can really change things for us. You can also find Liz, her contact information in the show notes, along with, as I mentioned, the books and the links to those books. Show notes are at jillcastle.com/120. That's 120 for episode number 120. Next up, I'm talking with Kelly Hawthorne. She's a neonatal dietitian, and we are discussing the birth to 24 months period. And we're going to dive in a little bit deeper into those new dietary guidelines for Americans, and specifically that birth through 24 months age range and the important role of early nutrition and feeding. We're going to walk through and highlight the latest research and information in this area for you. So make sure you tune in. I think it's going to be a great show. And then last, if you do like this show and you continue to look forward to episodes, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Feel free also to drop me a line with topic suggestions, feedback. I do love to hear from you, and you can also do that through my Facebook page, The Nourished Child, and connect with me there as well. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you do have a lovely week. Stay well, stay healthy, and most importantly, don't forget to give that child in your life, big or small, a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.